Hello everyone, so this is UPSC History Optional Paper 1 and we are at Topic 2 and Proto-History, Prehistory and Proto-History Part 3. After this part, I will make videos on Topic 3 of History Optional Paper 1, that is Indus Valley Civilization. Later on, when we are done with the whole syllabus of UPSC History Optional, then I will keep on adding more parts to each and every topic. But right now, we have to focus on the most important areas of each and every topic. So agenda for today. So today we'll talk about means pottery, BRW, that is black and red ware, OCP, Ochre-Coloured poetry means poetry and poetry. Like, okay. So NBPW, Northern Black Polished Ware. We'll talk about this. But the most important part which we have to do today is this UPSC 2017 question, which is talking about emergence of non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture. Once you have done this question, this is so holistic, this particular question. But once you have done this particular question, I think most of your portion of Chalcolithic culture will be covered. So let's try to see this particular question and then so many other questions will be answered. So emergence of non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture in Central India and Deccan mark a change not only in subsistence pattern, but overall transition from pre to proto history. Critically analyze. This is a very important keyword. Very, very important. When they are saying you critically analyze, that means you have to write the other aspect also. How this is not marking a change in subsistence pattern, how we need to know more. This is not enough what we know right now about Chalcolithic culture. So you have to criticize all the points which you have written earlier. That's why critically analyze is very, very important. Sometimes what happens now, there was one question in 2019, I guess, where they have given you 10 marker also they give you in history optional, right? 10 marker, 5 questions. And in the upward portion, they have written critically analyze, not in each specific question. Many people did not even see this critically analyze. They just wrote what the question was asking. They have to write the other aspect as well. So you have to pay attention to these words. So what are the different headings which you'll be writing here? So there will be three key things which they're talking about. Three headings there will be. First is change in subsistence pattern. This will be your first heading, change in subsistence pattern. Then your second heading will be transition from pre to proto history. Second heading is transition from pre to proto history. And the third heading will be criticism and limitation. Whatever we have discussed, what are the criticism of those points and what are the limitations of those points? Criticism and limitation, that will be your third heading. Once you have written enough points or you have written enough paras on these point means headings, your answer will be complete. But you have to address these three aspects. This is important actually. So let's start. What we can talk about in this particular question and what is non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture. So around the time when Indus Valley civilization was flourishing, there were contemporary non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture. Chalcolithic means copper. They were using copper. And copper was the first metal to be used prominently. Do remember, iron did not came first, copper came first. So this was the first metal to be used prominently. And around 3500 BC, this copper was discovered. Iron was discovered much later, around 600 to let's say 800 BC. Iron. And that led to second urbanization. We'll talk about that when we are talking about Vedic period. So copper was discovered first. Why was copper discovered only in the western portion? Because even if you see right now, Rajasthan and other areas, they have a lot of copper. So that's why this Chalcolithic culture emerged prominently in the Western India. So what are the things which we have to talk about here? So you can start with the basic definition that the first metal to be used prominently, mostly by the end of the Neolithic period, around 3500 BC we are talking about, was copper. And the period was called Chalcolithic period. It is so named because stone as well as copper was prevalent in this period. So they were using stone tools, but at the same time, they have also started using copper tools, copper plates, etc., etc. So some of the non-Harappan, so remember these Kayatha culture, Ahar and Manas culture, Jodhpura Ganeshwar culture, they were contemporary of Harappans, but they were not following the same things which Harappans were doing. They were having their own culture. And many of the things which we know about this particular culture, we are knowing from Harappan, like whatever things we have found in Harappa as well. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So these are some prominent Chalcolithic sites. Hope you can see them. This ninth one was asked in 2018. It is in Inamgaon. Then this was asked in 2017. Pandu Raja. Dibi, you have to practice this particular portion. I have told you again and again that more than the theory portion of this topic 2, they ask maps from this. And whenever you're doing map, it's better if you're writing the points and description because you have to write in 30 words also about each and every topic which you'll be writing, or which the points or the maps which you'll be sharing here, right? So then 15th and all these points. So these are the sites, and you're seeing most of them are prominently in the Western India. So yes, so some of the non-Harappan Chalcolithic cultures included Jorwe, Ahar, Kayatha, etc. Then Inamgaon, Daimabad, so many sites are there. You can have a look at it. If you want, I can even share the maps as well. Now, the first portion of this question, which we're talking about, what will be the first heading? The first heading is change in subsistence pattern. So what are the things which you can talk about here in change in subsistence pattern? So this is the question which we are talking about: emergence of non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture, mark a change not only in subsistence pattern, but overall transition. Make map if possible. Try to make a map. Try to show these places. Where is Jorwe? Where is Daimabad, Ahar, Kayatha, Gilund? All these places, try to show them. Even a rough map will do. So you don't have to be MF Hussain to make a map here. So yes, first, change in subsistence pattern. So here you can talk about that there was a transition from parasitic to sedentary lifestyle. And we have talked about this when we're talking about Neolithic culture as well. So similar Neolithic cultures phenomena were being extended in non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture as well. So people were not moving here and there. People were not having a dependence form of life, but they were dependent on wild fruits and animals, but they were moving to a more sedentary lifestyle. They were doing pottery. I always have a problem with pronouncing this word, pottery. So they were doing pottery and they were doing agriculture, fishing and all those things. And how you have to prove it. If you are saying that they were doing agriculture, what is the proof which you have? What is the proof which you are saying historians are giving? Or if you say that they're doing fishing, give the proof. So you have to give some proof. So first point in change in subsistence pattern, you can talk about that there was a transition from parasitic dependence form of life to sedentary lifestyle. Second thing you can talk about pottery. Pottery is a very important feature of Chalcolithic culture. So pottery was an important craft at this particular period. There was wheel-made pottery, there were handmade pottery, all these things were there. And there was a use of inverted firing technique. They were also using this inverted firing technique. What is inverted firing technique? We'll just discuss it. So because of this inverted firing technique, the pots which they were making, they were generally black from inside and red from outside, which led to the first evolution of pottery, which is known as BRW, black and red ware. So what is inverted firing? So generally what happens when you are lighting a fire, you're lighting from below, from bottom to top, the fire will go. From bottom to top, it is going, right? Convection, conduction, convection, radiation, read about it. But in inverted firing, you're burning from top to bottom. And how does it look? I will just show you. So inverted firing technique, you're burning from top to bottom. So this is inverted firing technique. So what you're seeing here is they are burning here and then these fires will go down. So it's actually violating so many things, so many laws of gravity. But yes, so this is inverted firing technique, a very special firing technique where you're burning from top to down. And that led to evolution of first kind of pottery, which was known as BRW, black and red ware. And the period was around 2400 BC when we were witnessing this, even earlier than that. Then after this came OCP, Ochre-Coloured pottery. You don't have to write these things. We are just trying to see the evolution of pottery. Sometimes in some exams, they will give you which pottery came first, which came later on. So this is around 2000 to 1500 BC and much later as well. So by early Vedic period, which we'll talk about later on, you will see this ochre-colored pottery. This ochre-colored pottery we're talking about. Early Vedic period, according to Max Muller, we'll talk about that later on as well. This is the early Vedic period. So that time they were using or they were making this ochre-colored pottery. Then later on, painted Greyware came around like 1000 to 600 BC, which is the later Vedic period. Do remember the chronology as well. So there is an evolution in pottery which is happening. And after that, after all of these, the last evolution is NBPW, Northern Black Polished Ware. This is a Northern Black Polished Ware, which was from like 600 BC to 100 AD. Obviously, once they know it, it's not like it will stop. It's not like Ochre-Coloured pottery stopped at 1000 BC. This evolution we are talking about, later on it continued. Later on, all these things continued. All these kind of potteries continued. But do remember, first came BRW, then you have OCP, then you have PGW, painted Greyware, and then you have NBPW. So this is the chronology. Fine, man. So we're talking about the change in subsistence pattern. We are talking about this 2017 question. So here you can talk about that pottery was an important craft. And in Ahar, like you can see here, Ahar Banas culture. Here in Ahar, we had discovered 7 different types of pottery. Oh my God, it's so funny. Some words are tongue twister. Pottery is a tongue twister for me. 7 different types of pottery. So now we are talking about the different points which we'll be writing in change in subsistence pattern. So different sizes and shapes of pottery. What does it tells you? It tells us the different uses. What were the different uses of the pottery and lifestyle of people? Like there were big storage jars. So what could be the use of these kind of potteries? Big storage jars, they were used to, or they might have been, we are guessing here, historians are also guessing, they are deducing stuff, so they might have been used for storing food grains. And all these are showing how the pattern is changed, the living style, the subsistence pattern is changing. Then there were perforated jars. Perforated jars. And how does this, or how do this perforated jar look? Like this? Let me show you. This one, this is a perforated jar. Very special kind of a pottery. This one, perforated jar, pottery. So this might have been used for making wines. Generally, when you have these kind of perforated jars, they're used for making wines. Then there were jars with narrow neck, which we still use. And these jars with narrow neck, they're used for storing water. They might have been used for storing water. So all these are showing the different subsistence pattern or the change in subsistence pattern. People are evolving. The lifestyle is evolving, right? Then Inamgaon pottery. We have just seen where was Inamgaon. It was asked by UPSC in 2017 also, I guess. So it has been found at several sites which are located very far away from Inamgaon. So if you again go back and see the Chalcolithic culture maps, if you see this point number 9, which is there, that is Inamgaon, asked in 2018 rather, not 2017. And this Inamgaon pottery, it has been discovered in places like this, Ahar, Gilund, etc. So when it is being found at several sites located far away, it shows that people used to trade pottery. So they were not only doing agriculture, trading has also started, but it was a barter system. There was no currency as such, barter system. Then charged food grains. Charred food grains. What are charged food grains? Burnt food grains. And again, we are giving evidence. If you're saying that they were doing agriculture, you have to prove it, dude. You have to prove it how you can prove that they were doing agriculture. So charged food grains, impression of paddy husk in pottery, it gives indication of agriculture practice. Tikasha, what else? What else you can talk about here? Then you can say that exists. And if you're saying that fishery or fishing was also being done here. So what is the evidence? So evidence of fishery is there are some paintings of fishes on pottery, painting of fishes on pottery. So all these are giving evidence of change in subsistence pattern. So this is what we are talking about. Change in subsistence pattern, parasitic to sedentary, pottery and important craft, wheel made as well as handmade, use of inverted firing technique, different uses of pottery, and all these things we have just discussed. So this is the first part. What will be the second part of this question? That is transition from pre to proto history. And this part, the things which we'll be writing here, or you will be writing here in this particular portion, we have already discussed it in part 1 of pre and proto history video lecture. So this is part 3. Go to part 1 and see what we have discussed. So again here, first of all, if you're trying to say that Chalcolithic, non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture is a transition from pre to proto history. So first of all, you have to define what is prehistory. The enormously long period before the invention of writing, and the study of that period is known as prehistory. Then you will talk about the different meanings of proto-history. There's no one uniform definition of proto-history. It varies. In different contexts, proto-history is carrying different meanings. Like in European context, we have discussed this, man. I'm discussing it for the second time, but this is like associated with this question. So that's why we're discussing it. So in European context, proto-history term is sometimes used to refer to people who did not themselves have writing, but who are mentioned in written records of contemporary literate group, right? And in Indian subcontinent, the Harappan civilization, which is a literate culture with an undeciphered script, is included in proto-history, right? But archaeologists, they have a different definition for proto-history. Archaeologists, what are they thinking about proto-history? So they are using this word proto-history for long period between the beginning of food production and advent of iron technology. And because they're using this long period between the beginning of food production and advent of iron technology, this would include Neolithic and Chalcolithic cultures in different parts of subcontinent, including non-Harappan Chalcolithic cultures. So this is what we are talking about. This whole thing which we are talking about here, the meaning of prehistory, different meaning of proto-history, and what archaeologists are describing proto-history as. So according to archaeologists' definition, even this particular portion, non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture, is a part of proto-history, which is marking a transition from pre to proto-history. So these points, you can go back to part 1 video, you can have a look at it. Again, the answer would be incomplete if you are not writing or not talking about the third heading, that is the criticism and the limitation part. So what you will write here, what are the things which you can talk about? So you can say that the first point which you can write here is that the major source of non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture is pottery. And you cannot, pottery does not reflect everything, man. It only reflects material culture. Only reflects material culture. You need to know, or you need to have more sources. Only reflects material culture. And that too in parts rather than presenting the whole picture. So this is one limitation of whatever we have known about Chalcolithic culture. Then decipherment of Harappan script. Remember, in Harappan culture also, so many Chalcolithic sites materials have been found. So we have to decipher Harappan script. We still do not, we have not deciphered yet Harappan script. So decipherment of Harappan script will go a long way in understanding contact between Harappan and their nearby non-Harappan Chalcolithic cultures, along with the subsistence pattern and their transition from pre to proto-history, right? Then the third point, so here you can talk about that this decipherment of Harappan script will help us a lot in knowing about the contemporary Chalcolithic culture. So this is one limitation. We don't have deciphered, or we have not yet deciphered Harappan script. Third point we have to, what you can talk about here is that this whole thing, whatever we know right now about non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture, it has to be understood in larger context in which they are found. And you have to corroborate it, need to be corroborated with other sources. And this has to be your favorite word. If you have taken history optional, this corroborated word has to be your favorite word. It should be, and it will be used a lot, need to be corroborated with other sources. That means you have to match it with other sources. You have to see it with other sources and then come to a definite conclusion. So that's it. And then in the conclusion part, you can say that various interpretation of non-Harappan Chalcolithic cultures from pottery need to be corroborated with other sources like various tools, implements, settlement pattern, burial practices, etc., to arrive at a more holistic picture of Chalcolithic culture. So that's it, man. I think that would be more than enough. We have done this thing. In the next part of history optional, we'll talk about Indus Valley civilization. So many questions have been asked there. So try to see the UPSC previous year questions as well. Take care, be blessed. Bye-bye.